So good afternoon. Just for the cameras again, just say your name and your position.
Hi, Maceo. I'm Sharon Hammond. I'm president of the Bermuda Triathlon Association.
So yeah, 2 busy weeks. We had a World Triathlon event here, and then the next week we followed up with a Junior Carifta event. Just talk me a little bit about some of the organization pieces that went into their Junior Carifta event.
Yeah, so we were not meant to have back-to-back events like this. Carifta was meant to be held in September, over the weekend of the 23rd, 24th, but Hurricane Fiona ensured that that was not the case. So putting on events of that size and caliber was a bit of a challenge, but actually in a way maybe it was fortuitous, because off the back of the WCTS competition, we were all in competition mode and in organization mode, and so I think in retrospect putting on Carifta ended up possibly being smoother because it was the week after. Everybody was here in place, ready to go. But in terms of organizing it, we were due to hold Carifta Games in 2020. And obviously that did not happen due to COVID. Carifta, for those who don't know, is a collaboration of all the national federations within the Caribbean region, of which there are 20 odd countries. Some countries are more active than others, and some have a bigger triathlon presence than others. So it was really down to 10 countries that were in strong dialogue throughout that whole time. And in January of this year, we agreed that we would hold it. It's been a challenge for us and for some of the other countries in terms of funding post-COVID to travel, to train, to put on events. But Bermuda was fortunate coming out of COVID to be a little bit better than some of the other countries, and so we agreed to take it on. We had a local organizing committee formed in January, and this committee basically worked to create the competition, if you like, to create the course, and then to bring on stakeholders to help us really stage it.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, both of the events were, amazing and well organized. What are some of the feedbacks? And let's get back to the World Triathlon last week. What are some of the feedbacks from the athletes that came to Bermuda, and seeing the Bermuda Island, and as we showcase the island? What are those feedbacks that come back?
So I guess for the benefit of people who aren't very aware of how these things are staged, the World Triathlon Championship Series is a series of events all over the world. This was not purely a Bermuda staged event. We had our sort of organizing committee in collaboration with a Canadian company who put on the Edmonton events, so they were very well versed in this, and they were very much a part of the organizing committee. So it took hundreds of people to put on WCTS. The athletes, we had 55 elite athletes in the men, slightly fewer in the women, and these are the very best. I mean, we had the Olympic gold medal winners, male and female here, World Championship. These are the best of the best who turned up, which shows how important this race was to them. Some of them had been here before, some hadn't. The feedback across the board from athletes to team managers to technical officials to everybody who traveled to Bermuda was how professional the event was. And for some, despite the weather, which wasn't kind to us, it was a very difficult weekend of racing. Despite that, everybody only had positive things to say about Bermuda. And I can speak to one of the athletes who, at the very last minute, literally a week before, decided she was coming, and she podiumed, and she said, "This was the best race of the season, and I'll be back." So, there's your feedback.
Good to hear. I mean, I thought it was a nice touch, even with the commentator, the Bermuda commentator. How come I'm missing her name?
Katrina, Power Girl.
That was a nice touch to localize it a little bit, and the questions that she was asking during the race and educating the fans. So that was also a nice touch.
And I loved the relationship that she and Greg Welch, he's an ex-professional triathlete, represented Australia at the Olympic Games and across the board. But I loved the interplay between them, because obviously Greg knows everything about triathlon, and Katrina, by her admission, knew nothing about triathlon that morning, but by the end of the day she was an expert, because he used her as a platform to educate and to tell the viewers and whoever was listening exactly what was happening. And I just loved their relationship. I thought it worked so well.
So let's fast forward to the triathlon last week. What do you think the athletes, do you think having that event a week before the career that motivated some of our athletes? Because I'm hearing that some of our athletes perform beyond what we thought they was going to perform. You think it was a direct motivation as to seeing Flora and seeing that whole event?
Oh, undoubtedly. It was so inspirational for these young athletes to see really their sort of heroes out there. I mean, Flora winning any time is amazing. Flora competing any time is amazing. But Flora winning in Bermuda in that manner, yet again, she just dominated. And I think that was hugely inspirational for all the young athletes. We mustn't underestimate the difficulty they were in. They had prepared for the 23rd of September. They'd been preparing all summer, 6 days a week for about 8 weeks. These kids had been training, and I used to see them out and about, and I was tired just watching them. So they trained hard, they tapered, they were all ready, and then the hurricane came. So then you get this sort of deflation, this lack of motivation that creeps in, and their coaches were fantastic in allowing them a week or so of just, okay, let's get over the disappointment, but know that we've got another date. And then they had to carry on training, get back to school, get back to all the stuff that they do, and they carried on. And I think, I'm sure we would have seen great performances without having had the WCTS, but I think that just elevated everybody.
I mean, I interviewed one of the athletes, and she basically told the story of sports, right? Having to overcome obstacles. That's what these young athletes are showing, that they're been able to overcome obstacles. One of your athletes talked about her panicking in the water and having to calm herself and overcome and refocus herself. So I mean, I think what we're articulating here is just the power of sports, what it does for one's life. Yeah. So with that, what is next for the association and our young athletes after such a good showing at Carifta?
So, what actually the positives, if we can take positives from COVID, is that it allowed us all just to slow down a little bit and have time, and we were able to really concentrate on our youth development squad and youth development from the ages of around 14, 15, where we see, I think, a big drop-off and attrition in all sports, but especially in girls in sports at this age. Having everybody here over COVID meant people needed something to do, right? And so we could concentrate on our youth development. But we were also then able to go and get sponsorship. And so the ministry have been very supportive of our initiatives, as has HSBC. So we now have developed a squad and really a pathway for youth development that is young. We're only in our 3rd year, but we have shown improvement and results. And I think part of the legacy bit of more so WCTS than Carifta, but Carifta as well, is getting kids who have never ever been exposed to multi-sport, which essentially is triathlon, duathlon, anything involving more than one thing, exposing them to these sports. And so we've held clinics last year, well, every year since WTS 2018, for free clinics for kids to come and join us on a Sunday and run and bike. So we've also this year actually started an initiative with primary schools to do an after-school club to, again, just expose kids to multi-sport. And I think what we'd really like to see is more diversity in our sport, and by taking the sport to the kids is how we're going to engage them. And if you saw the Renry duathlon on the Sunday morning of WCTS, many of those kids were kids who did the HSBC clinics, and those were kids who don't necessarily have bikes, that we loaned them bikes to be able to participate.
But I mean, that builds into the new national policy where we're trying to diversify our sporting participation, as well as increase participation, and trying to find out the vehicle to bring sports to people just to live healthier lifestyles. So kudos to your organization in getting ahead of that one, and we'll definitely be working a little closer together in the future to facilitate things like that. But from your mission, where do you think we stand? Or we as a country finish? What position we finished in the
We finished second overall.
Second overall.
Yeah, second overall.
So that's another for us at Youth and Sports. Also in our national policy is how do we start to dominate in our region. So that bodes well for what we're looking at and creating the support base to be able to do out in our region. So again, kudos to the organization and the girls. But where do you see what is needed for our next steps now for our athletes? What type of support and from your organization, from government, from the country at large is needed for our next steps?
So for next steps, I think we need to expose our athletes to competing overseas and against their peers in the region and USA and Canada. Our athletes compete against each other week in, week out. They know exactly how that person swims and that person bikes, and they can formulate their race plan based on the fact that they know their competitors so well. I think what the weekend showed was when you don't know your competitor, it brings in a whole new element into racing. And so we definitely need to be able to support our kids going overseas and really competing against their peers. Bringing races here is great, but that's not something we can do all the time. And in talking to all the other federations over the weekend, that was also their comment, is we need to get our kids racing against the regional sort of their peers.
Where are we in our region as far as our acceptance? I guess the word is acceptance of triathlons. I would suggest that it's something new to our region, the sport. Well, where are we in our region in competing, as it relates to triathlons?
Do you mean Bermuda or the Caribbean region?
The Caribbean region, yeah.
So, the Caribbean region is a very unique region in that it's made up of lots of islands, lots of small nations, lots of islands, competing against much bigger federations, much bigger countries with pools of athletes. If you look at a lot of the professional athletes, they may come into triathlon late. They might come from a swim background or a track background. Triathlon isn't one of those things that, like Flora, you start at 7 and you become the Olympic champion. More and more so we're hearing that, but that isn't necessarily the pathway for everybody. We have a really healthy participation of triathlon in the region, but we have the challenges of small islands and small nations, really. And I have to really thank World Triathlon because they have listened to us and they've heard our challenges are different to even small countries in Europe where travel is so easy.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw how difficult it was to get the athletes here. We've got, limited number of flights to Bermuda. It's across the region this happens. So our challenges are really unique to us. And that's why collectively we try and speak as a region, because obviously more voices are louder. And World Triathlon actually sent a developmental coach to come and observe Carifta and observe not just the athletes. He obviously was here to see the caliber and the level of competition, but also to see the level of coaching and the interaction of the coaches with the athletes and with the team managers, and to see how it all works. And when I had my sort of debrief with him, and he's been to he specializes in small nations. He's been to many small nations. He said to me, Sharon, I have never been anywhere on one of these trips before where what I saw exceeded my expectations. So I think it shows that triathlon is healthy in the region, but we do need some help.
Yeah. And the last thing, I know that you guys have been successful creating a partnership with World Triathlon where they're sponsored are they sponsored, came on as a financial partner when it comes to
No, not exactly, but they did. They assisted us in applying for Olympic Solidarity funding to help some of the athletes, to fund 2 athletes from each federation to come, a male and a female athlete. So World Triathlon applied on our behalf to Olympic Solidarity for the funding.
So it is some type of partnership that is growing. You guys,
and I think that showed their support to us, which, as I say, I'm really grateful for.
Well, definitely here at Youth in Sports, we're grateful for the work that you're doing in sports and in your sports. Definitely looking forward to interacting with you a lot more in the future.
Oh, thank you, Maceo.